It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video. This time I want to do a series on Rockstor. So we previously did one on TrueNAS for network attached storage, and that's a Unix/BSD based system, which is really great. It uses jails for doing plugins and has a lot of really great systems for getting storage and backups running through ZFS. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go check out that video series as well. I think you'll really like it, and the interface is really great. TrueNAS Core is what used to be FreeNAS, and it's been around for like a decade, so it's super stable and super amazing. I really like it. But when I was looking for a really good NAS solution, I was looking more specifically for Linux initially, and I came across Rockstor. So Rockstor is based on CentOS Linux, and you basically do the same kind of install where it's really you're at a machine and you need a monitor connected to it just for the install. But once the installation is complete, you can then just run it headless, and you basically log into it through a web browser. So today I'm going to go through the installation of Rockstor using the monitor, and then once that's installed, we'll move over to a web browser where we're accessing it over the network, and we'll go through some of the settings and then setting up some storage, just kind of the basics of storage and user setup. In the next part of the series, we'll get into more detailed user and storage setup, and actually how to make a backup run from a machine, you know, maybe a Linux machine and maybe a Mac. I don't have any Windows machines to try, but it's the same concept. And then for the third part of the series, we'll look at the plugins architecture that they use in Rockstor, which is pretty cool. So and they call them rock-ons, which uses Docker in the background. So if you know how to do Dockerized applications and you have one you want, you can even add your own, which is really cool. I might do a separate video on adding your own, but for now we'll use the ones that they have in the store, and they have a lot, and they're adding more all the time. And they have an active community, which I really like. So when I was first learning about it and doing things in it, I went several times and asked in their community, and they were able to give me answers or tell me where to go to look for answers, which is always great. So Rockstor, we're going to look at that one next, and we'll get into the install right after this. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. Alright, I'm about to take this system that's been running, TrueNAS, and I'm going to reboot it right here. And when it reboots, I'm going to use the F11 key in my case to bring up the boot menu. And sometimes it works the first time, sometimes I got to keep trying, so we'll see if it kicks off what I want here. There it is. So once you come to the boot menu, I'm going to install Rockstor. So Rockstor, if you're not familiar with it, is very much like TrueNAS, except it runs on CentOS Linux, and it's pretty cool. I've used it in the past, and I'm going to set it up for you guys today and let you kind of see what it does. So you can compare that to TrueNAS and see what you might want more, but it's a NAS system. It's a network attached storage system as well. So I'm going to put it on this same machine that I was running TrueNAS on. That way you can kind of compare, you know, machine to machine, the exact same specs, the exact same drives, everything like that. So when you bring up the actual boot screen here, I know that's a little bit hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom it in a little bit for you, and then I'll adjust the camera. That way you can just kind of see what the options look like as I'm going through, and then I'll kind of adjust it each time. So let me adjust this. Now, your boot screen on your system will look most likely different unless you're using the same exact board that I am, but you usually get these different options here, and you just want to kind of cycle through them with your keyboard. Usually your keyboard will work. There we go. So again, you see that I have UEFI SanDisk, and then I have SanDisk. So the difference is that one says, okay, if you want to use UEFI, you can set that up. Now I've turned off UEFI on this particular machine, so I don't want to use that. So I'm just going to use the regular SanDisk installer. Once you get there, you're just going to hit enter. And that should kick off the actual startup. So once you get here, you'll see, and let me adjust the camera again. So when you get to this screen, you'll see that you have two options here, and one is install Rockstor, and then the other one is test the media, and then of course there's troubleshooting at the bottom. So you want to make sure you've highlighted install Rockstor, and then you're going to press enter. Now it's a little hard to see the top of the screen there, but there's a little bit of information at the top, but this is just going to run down and do a basic boot up for us here. Okay, so this brings you up to the nice graphical installer, a base graphical installer that you get with any kind of Fedora or CentOS system. And the secret on this is you want to go through and work on anything that has a little triangle with an exclamation point, but you may also want to set some other things like your time zone, stuff like that. So it's pretty important to kind of go through all the different settings on this and make sure that you've got everything. And sometimes it's a little bit strange how they work or why they have set what they have set. So it's good to check them just in case. So first thing, date time. I am connected to the internet, but it has the wrong time zone. All right, so I'm in America and I am in the Chicago time zone. Once you get that set, you can go back here to done. Keyboard says English US, that's what we want. Again, language default, English United States, that's fine. If you want to set up security policies, you can. In this case, I'm not going to set up any preset security policies, but we can do some of that stuff through the software later. So installation source, when you click on this, you get a couple of options. So we're going to go up here and click on the option that we want for what we're trying to accomplish here. So here it's already pre-selected that I want to install on the network, and it's going to use the closest mirror, and then it wants to do updates. So I think all of these settings are good. If you have a preferred mirror, you can type in the name of the mirror and the location, everything like that you want to use. But in this case, I don't, so I'm just going to let it auto-select for me. The nice thing about using the mirrors for the installation is that it'll go get all of the updates, and there won't be updates. There won't be hundreds of updates to do afterwards. It'll get all of the latest stuff that we need, which is really great. So under software installation, it says Rockstor Server. That is what we want. So now installation destination. This one's important because this is where we're going to install the software to. So we want to click on this. And we want to make sure that we pick the correct drive. So you can see that it's identified quite a few drives here. So in this case, it's auto-selected the smallest drive, which is also my SSD, so that's correct. But if you happen to look and it's selected a drive that is not correct, you want to pick the right drive. Now you can click and then unselect, and then click to reselect, just to make sure that it's got the right drive selected. You can also add a disk if it doesn't show the disk up here. You may have to go through some partitioning stuff if you do that. So if you can find the disk in the options there already in your system, it's better. But once you're done with that, click on done. We're going to say go ahead. You go through and you delete each piece inside of there, and then once you've deleted everything that you want to get rid of, you hit reclaim space, and it'll reclaim that space for installation. And finally, network. So we're going to click on the network setup, and everything here does look good. I have a hardwired interface, and it's got the right IP address, so I'm just going to click on done. Now that we've done all of that, we can go down here and click on this next piece. So now we're going to select begin installation. Now while it's installing and getting ready to install, now you want to make this a strong password, and if you don't, then it's going to prompt you that you need to confirm it. So in this case, it's just a test system. I'm just going to use a password that I'm pretty sure it's not going to like. And if you do that, you're going to click done. You have to click done 2 times to confirm that you want to use that password. All right, when it completes, you'll get a message like this, which says Rockstor is now installed and ready for you to use. Reboot now to get started. So all you have to do is then click on the button that says reboot now. It'll go through a brief shutdown process, and then it's going to restart. And really, again, this is one just like TrueNAS, that once you've installed the operating system, you can run it headless, and you don't actually have to run it with a monitor anymore, because you're going to access it through a browser. Now we'll continue the rest of this video back inside from the browser. All right, we're going to jump into the actual settings and setup of Rockstor now that we've got the installation complete. So I'm just going to open up a new browser tab here, and on my network I'm just going to go to Rockstor, that's rockstor.local. Now this is kind of what you'll see the first time you log in, and you do get this prompt that says, hey, you need to update. So let me talk to you about what this prompt really says before we get into the dashboard that's kind of there in the background and everything. So when you read through it, it sounds like, oh yeah, I need to go do that. And you probably should, but I want to talk about a few things. So I'm going to click on that button that says, yeah, let's go do it. And it's going to bring you to another page on your server. And it's going to kind of tell you, hey, here's the options that you have. You can go and get the stable set, which you can click on activate here, and it kind of tells you that it's every 3 to 4 weeks and you get these stable updates and stable versions. Or you can get in the testing side. So if you like to be on the bleeding edge, you know, if you're an Arch kind of person maybe you want to run this. So you can go and run this and you can activate that one. Really, when you click this, it's going to say, hey, you need to get an activation code. So then you say, okay, well, how do I do that? You read these steps, and there's this little link right here that says click here. Now, this brings you to a page where you pay, and this is how Rockstor supports the development of Rockstor itself. This is not something you have to do. I want you guys to understand that out of the gate. This is something you can do if you want to help support Rockstor because you like it. Now, if you're just installing it like we are, you're probably not going to want to go do this right away. But before we're finished, I imagine I'm going to go and pay £20, whether I keep Rockstor installed or not. I'm going to go pay this because I want to help support this effort. I think it's really awesome, and I think it's great that they're out there doing this work. So I think it's totally worth it, and it helps support open source projects like Rockstor. For now, I'm going to close this out, and we're going to go back to our normal Rockstor install. I'm going to cancel that. Down here, you'll have something that says enable auto update. So I've already clicked it, so it says disable. So go ahead and do enable auto update. It doesn't do anything when you click that one except just kind of set it up. And then as we're using the system, you see this little thing that looks like an RSS feed kind of blinking. If you hover that, it tells you, hey, there's Yum updates available, which is what the CentOS package manager uses. So you may want to kind of pay attention to that because it tells you, hey, there's updates, and you can kind of go see what these things are. And then you can say update packages. It'll ask, do you want to proceed? And you click on OK. And it kind of in the background, it's going to go do those things. I don't really know that we even need to go look at anything else while it's going. We're just going to let it kind of do its thing. So as you look at the interface, you can see that up here is our user, and when you click, you get kind of similar to what you see with TrueNAS. And you're going to see a lot of similarity between Rockstor and TrueNAS. So here you can log out, you can shut it down, or you can reboot the server remotely through the web browser, which is great. Next to it, you see this version. As far as I can tell, this isn't an actual version because I was asked for the version once and I gave it to them and I gave them this and they said, that's not a version. So there's something weird going on with their versioning. I don't know what it is, but I think they're aware of it. But then you've got your uptime and a little bit more information here that you can kind of check out. So there's the donate option, so you can say, you know, I want to donate a little bit of money to help keep this project going. So if you didn't want to pay for the license activation, you can just donate a little bit of cash and help it keep going that way as well. Then there's the shop. So if you want to go shop, you know, kind of the same thing. It's really pretty much doing that license activation as far as I know, but you may be able to get some gear, some shirts or something like that if you really love Rockstor. But as we move kind of over and into the system, I'm going to go back to the dashboard. So it's going to prompt you every time you click on that dashboard button. Just be ready for that. And when you're testing it out, just say no thanks. If you want to keep running it like this, just say no thanks. It's really not that hard to click. No thanks. But one of the things you see on this dashboard is that it actually starts doing stuff. It's moving. You can see that it's a live dashboard. Now, one of the things I like is that as I start adding disks, you'll see this tracking disk activity, which is really cool, and it looks really cool. So we'll kind of see that here in a minute when we add some disks and stuff. But for now, you can kind of see an overview of your system, and you can grab these things and you can move them around. You say, I want this here. So it's pretty cool. And you can change their sizes and do all kinds of stuff to kind of lay it out the way that you want. So that's really the dashboard, and that's kind of where you jump in most of the time. Now, over on the left for the dashboard, you can check or uncheck different things you want to see or don't want to see. So if you don't want to see disk activity, you can just uncheck it and you won't see it anymore. And if you want to see it again, just check it and it'll come back up. It's pretty simple. You can also make these larger, and then you can close them out. So you've got a few different options of how to control your dashboard here. Now you can say expand for details, and you'll see what it looks like when you get that expanded view. And you see now it's showing some actual activity going on there on the disk, and you can see that my dashboard grew. So depending on if you like things like this or not, you can leave it, and you can switch this to view different information about different disks down below as well. So it'll just pick one by default, but you can kind of see what's going on. So this is probably my main drive, and I can see those details. Alright, now I've got my system back to the way it was when we started here with the dashboard, and we're going to move over to System. So we're going to start with System, and we're going to start with Services. And this really is services on the system. So you can see there's a pretty nice list of services. I'm going to enlarge this. It's going to kind of mess with the UI a little bit, but it makes it easier for you guys that may be using your phones. So first thing is Active Directory. If you're an Active Directory person, you're setting up Rockstor, you have the option to set up Active Directory for your user access here. You have AFP, Apple File Protocol. So if you want to set up Apple File Protocol for Time Machine, you can do that by turning this on right here. Now, Apple switched over to Samba way back in 2014, so in theory, the Samba should just work. We'll give it a try, we'll see if it works. If not, we can come back and switch on AFP. Bootstrap, so you can turn that on or off, and it's got a little eye here, which means that you've got some information about it that you can find. So it's got little different tidbits here that I believe we should be able to see. There we go, if we hover it. Yeah, so service responsible for bootstrapping Rockstor when the system starts. So you probably want to leave that on, because basically when the system starts it's CentOS, and then it's kicking in to say, oh, and also start Rockstor. If you use LDAP, you've got an LDAP option here as well. So you can see here's the settings, and you can click that guy on. If you want to use NFS, so you can click this on. If you want to use NIS, I'm not sure what this is, let's find out. So if you have an NIS server, you have domain and the server, and you can set that up. NTP, so if you want to use a time protocol server, you can also set that up. If you're using a UPS, you can set that up as well. Replication, if you want to do replication of this server, you can set that up by turning this on and then clicking on the little wrench, and it'll ask you about the network interface you want to use for the replication and the listener port, so if this is going to be the server you're replicating to. Rock-ons, if you want to turn on the rock-ons, which we will, we're going to click this guy on, and then you'll see that there's a little bit of information here, and you can say, you know, root share, so we're going to pick which share we want, but we haven't set up our shares yet, so we'll pick a share where to store the rock-ons at. Then we've got Rockstor itself, which is on. Smart, which tests your drives and keeps track of your drives, which is on. We've got Samba, which we're going to want, so we're going to go ahead and turn on Samba. And we're going to give it a work group name, and I'm just going to use the generic Windows work group name just because that seems to be what things default to a lot of times. So we're just going to do that, and then custom global configuration, I don't really have any, so I'm just going to say submit. And Samba should be on. Yep, there it is. Then you have SFTP, so if you want to use SFTP for your backups, you can also do that, and that's of course port 22, so that's already on. And then finally shell in a box, so we can turn that on, and we'll just click on, and then we'll go down here and set it up. And we're going to use shell connection service as login, and it tells you as you hover what these things mean. So default shell in a box connection. So root direct login not allowed, SU required, SSH connection with root user allowed, and then less secure for the system. So we're going to do login. Shell color scheme is white on black, but you can switch it to black on white, so it's up to you. I'm going to use white on black. And then open the shell in the pop-up window if you want. Firefox sends a block pop-up, so I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to click submit now that we've got the shell turned on. So we've got a few settings set up here, and we've actually got 2 pages of services. So finally, you've got SNMP. So if you want to set up SNMP messages for your network, for something to grab a hold of and use those things like Nagios or something, you can do that. And this refreshes on its own, so it's kind of annoying. We can just expand it to say show me 30 entries, and then we can see everything. And finally we have ZTaskD, so I'm not sure what that is, but again it's already on by default, so you can leave it on or you can turn it off if you want to. So you can see there is kind of an annoying refresh that wants to make the screen jump, but normally when it's at normal size you won't have to worry about that because you can see everything anyways. I'm just zooming it up so you guys can see everything. So we're going to turn on AFP while we're at it. There we go. We'll go ahead and turn on NFS, even though I don't really use NFS while we're at it. And let's see, I think SFTP was already on. Yeah, SFTP is on already. So we're good there. We've got those services turned on. So that's kind of step one. So now I'm going to zoom this back out so we can see our menu. Here we go. So there we've got that. Now you've got identity sets, so you've got access keys. If you want to generate access keys, again, these are just test keys. I'm going to delete this server eventually, but if it makes you happy to check this one out, go for it. So access keys, and you can set up access keys for different people, but you really need to set up users and groups. So here you have groups, and you can kind of see what the default groups are. I suggest just setting up a new user and letting the group be generated for that user. But if you want to have more users in a single group and then set permissions by group, you can do that. So you can create groups and then add multiple users to a single group and then give permissions to the group for your different storage and shares. And then users, of course. So here we have users, and you can see I'm already a user, but I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of adding another user. So the username in this case would not be repeated, so I'm going to put in my wife as a user, and it says allow this user to log into Rockstor Web UI. So you can choose whether this person should be able to log into the Web UI or not. In this case, she doesn't need to. I'm just setting this up so that she can use this for backups, and then give them a password and repeat it. And then you can give them a public key if you want them to have it. Their login shell type is bin bash in this case. User ID, you know, I don't need to create a new one. I think the system will do that. And then group, create a new one, and email. So I'll put in her email, and that's can't fix it. Can't type today. There we go. So I'll submit that and save it. And there she is right there. So we've got her set up. Now this separates the users by admins and other system users. So that's why it's kind of set that way. So here's your admin users up here, and then here's your other system users down here. So I've set up my wife as a user. It was pretty simple. Didn't take any effort at all. So let's go look at network. So if you have multiple NIC cards, this is where you can kind of control what's going on those different NICs. In this case, I've only got one, and it's the local area network that's wired. So we're just going to kind of keep it like it is. You do have the option to set up scheduled tasks. So when you click on scheduled tasks, you can basically set up what do you want the task to be. In this case, ButterFS scrub, ButterFS snapshot, system reboot, system shutdown, or system suspend. So maybe you have a lot of traffic and you just like to reboot your system once a week. You can set that up and then set it up in here using basically when you want that to happen and what you want it to do. And I mean, it's really just not hard. You could give it a task name so you can see it in the system. Let's do a system reboot. Let's just call this maintenance reboot, and then I can say every week on Friday at 3 a.m. Okay, how about that? So every week on Friday at 3 a.m. the system's going to reboot itself. I'm going to submit that, and then there it is. You can see your task in the list. It's pretty easy to set that up. Nothing difficult about it, and you may want to set up multiple tasks to do different things, but you can do that here with the scheduler. So software update, we've already kind of been to this page, but I'll show it to you again. You can get here from the software update in the menu. Appliances. So if you have multiple Rockstor appliances on the network, they can find each other and they may be listed in this list. They may not. It just depends on how your network is set up, but this is the only one it's going to find, which is itself in my case because it's the only one I've got. If you have SSL certificates that you've created, you can basically upload those SSL certificates and then use them for access to different things that we'll do in the future with rock-ons or with just accessing Rockstor through the web UI itself. So you can back up your configuration. So if you remember in TrueNAS, you could back up that configuration as you made it. You can do the same thing in Rockstor, so if something detrimental happens and you've got that backed up somewhere, you can install Rockstor, import that config, and your system will be back to the way that you had it. Email alerts. So this is kind of an important one. Again, whenever you're setting up your systems, you want to be able to get email alerts, and I showed you this over on TrueNAS. So here you can set up email alerts, and of course you would put in the name of the person. And it says put in the name of the associated person for the email, so that's me. And then the sender email. So the username may be different from the actual email. You could just click this, but I'm just going to use the same one. In my case, it's the email address. Password, and I'd have to go get it because I don't even remember. Probably something like that, but it's not right. So that's just picking my password from this site. But you get your email password, put it in there, your SMTP server. So mine is box.fixitdelrio.com. And then your port is very important, and whether it uses TLS is very important. And then finally the recipient email, who should it send to? In this case, it would just send it straight to me again, so that I would know that something has happened. Then you can test it once you've got all your parameters set up, and then you can save to actually save the email. So once you've got things working, you can save it and you're good to go, and you'll get emails from the system. Logs Manager. So you can check out the logs of different things that are going on, and these can be useful for you as an administrator, but it can also be useful whenever you're asking for support over at the Rockstor site or Rockstor community, because they may ask you for certain logs, and you can go in here and gather those logs for them. Finally, the system shell. This is kind of what we set up a while ago. So this is my Rockstor logon. So let's see, I'm going to do this, and I'm in. So now I can just go in and do the same things that I would always do. There's nothing here, but I can say cd/ls, and there's a few things in /. So it just gives me terminal access through the web browser, which is kind of cool. I can exit, and it'll give you the connect button that says basically when you connect, it'll ask you to log in again. So there's the system shell. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, right? So now we're going to go over to storage, because we've talked about users and storage. And there's just a whole list of things that you need to go through here, just like anything else, but you can see the same things over on the left, which is great. So you can navigate through the menu, you can navigate through the left. It's really up to you how you do this. So we're going to go over here to disks, and you'll see, if I'll zoom back out a bit, that I have quite a few disks. I've got 6 disks that it finds. One of them is the actual install disk for Rockstor itself, which is this small 250 gig disk up here. After that, you'll see that I've got several other disks on the system. So these disks probably need to be set up, and there's kind of a little process you go through to set them up. And the little things tell you information about these disks. So I'm going to zoom back up to make this a little bit bigger on the interface. So let me say this. Rockstor is just like TrueNAS when it comes to USB drives. If you have 2 USB drives, whether they're Seagate and Western Digital, or it just doesn't matter. If they're in the same kind of enclosure, they will get the same serial number, and Rockstor will only be able to work with one of them. It cannot figure out the difference between those drives. If you have a drive bay, like I've got several 4 drive bays that all connect up through a single USB to the system, Rockstor just thinks those are all the same drive, and it just picks one drive, and it's kind of random which one it gets every time, because they don't start up in the same order every time. So it's not useful for me to have those in there. It's better to have single USB bays that are different. So you want to buy different USB containers for different manufacturers, and then make sure that those get different serial numbers so that Rockstor can handle it. So we're going to go here. This is the main Rockstor drive. We're not going to mess with this, but it says Rockstor System Drive. This one says disk is unusable as it contains partitions and no user assigned role. Click to configure or wipe. So this is my 2 terabyte drive. I'm just going to click on it, and you'll see you get this page that comes up and kind of tells you what's going on. And as you come to the bottom, you're going to see the information about the drive, and you'll see this thing that says whole disk, none, part 2 ZFS member, part 1 none. So we're just going to leave it on whole disk, and it says tick to wipe the data and file system on the above active device. Whole disk removes all partitions. So we're going to click on that thing, and it says warning, this will delete all data on the above device. And then we're going to click on submit. So now you see that little icon changed. So it was a gear, now it's this. It says assign an optional hold disk role. It says click to edit. So you don't actually have to do this, but you can click to edit it, and it says hold disk none. Okay, active, but you could say tick to enable hold disk encryption. So you can do this if you want to, but this is just the same thing we just did basically. So there's nothing else to do there. We're pretty much done with this one. Now if we go, if I zoom out, so before I do much else, let me zoom out and we'll go back to storage, and now we're going to go to pools. We still only see the Rockstor drive in our pool, but we can now create a pool. So when we come to this, we're going to give it a name for our pool. We can pick the role or the RAID configuration, so it could be a single disk, it could be RAID 0, it could be RAID 1, RAID 10, RAID 5, or RAID 6. So you kind of need to understand what these mean. And it doesn't exactly tell you that kind of stuff. It gives you a little bit of information over here. But basically, in my case, I would probably leave this as a single drive. And then don't enable compression. You can do zlib or TZ or LZO. Then you have other options you can set, and it kind of gives you information out here in the pop-up. And then you select the drive or drives that you want to use. So it kind of gives you some information. You click submit, and that would set up this drive. Now we're not going to do this yet, but I want to show you that we went through that process with the disk, and you need to do this with each disk in the system. So I'm going to go back and do that with each of my disks and get them all set up, and then we'll come back and finish up setting up some storage. Alright, I got all of the disks set up, so you can see all of my disks here. Now keep in mind, this is the root volume where the operating system is at, so we won't be using this for anything other than just keeping that root volume set for now. But here you can see that I've got the rest of the disks set up, and I set them up the same way I showed that first one. It really only took me about 30 seconds, even though it's been 2 days since I've been recording. Life happens, so you know, had to go and take care of some things for family, and you know, just normal things that happen on a daily basis. But as we move down through storage, you'll see there's pools. This is where you create your storage pools, and really you just follow this menu down. And then you've got shares. So you go set up your disks, you create pools. From the pools you create shares, and you can create partial spaces of a pool as a share, just like on TrueNAS. And then as you go down, you can take snapshots of those shares, which ButterFS is amazing for doing snapshots. And then you can do replication. So if you want to replicate any of those shares out to other systems, you can do that. And then down here are your file system options. So here you've got NFS, which I've got turned on. And then we've got Samba, which is turned on. And SFTP, which is turned on. And AFP, which is turned on. Now, if you're not going to use all of these, you don't have to turn on all of these services. You can just turn on the ones you intend to use. But you've got 4 good options here for different types of backups, which is great. So we're going to go to pools real quick and just create a pool. So right here, you've got your disk set up, and we're going to go in here and say create pool. And you're going to give it a pool name just like anything else. So we're just going to call this backups. So here you get into your options, and you can say this is going to be a single drive, or this is going to be a RAID setup where I'm going to use multiple drives. And you need to understand what these RAID versions actually mean. So if you're not sure what these are, you can just go out and kind of Google them. So if we go Google RAID 0, 1, 10, 5, and 6, you can see what those are. So let's go take a look. Just type in what is RAID 0. And you're going to get all kinds of things. But right here, pretty quickly, right, is known as a striped set or striped volume. And it splits or stripes the data evenly across 2 or more disks, you know, without parity information. So it's important to understand, if I put 3 disks in a RAID 0, it's going to stripe the information across those disks, but there's no parity, there's no redundancy. So you need to kind of comprehend what that really means for you. It means that you're getting more out of those volumes because you're kind of stacking them together. So if you have 3 1 terabyte disks, you'll get 3, you know, almost 3 terabytes out of it. But if one of those disks dies, you may lose data, because I don't know that RAID 0 has the ability to kind of resilver itself. You know, those kind of things. It could just depend on what you're using for your file system in order to do that, like you do with ZFS. But there's RAID 0. And then if you look at RAID 10, it's a mix between RAID 1 and RAID 0. Well, in fact, let's look at RAID 1 first. And so RAID 1. So RAID 1 is an exact mirror or copy. So if you have two 1 terabyte disks, you're going to have a terabyte of storage, and then you're going to have a mirrored copy of that terabyte of storage. So RAID 1 does a copy of that. When you do a mix of RAID 10, I believe that means that you get striped information across disks. So in this case, you want to probably have an even number of disks. So you're going to have 4 1 terabyte disks, and you'll get 2 terabytes that are striped and then 2 terabytes that are mirrored for that striping. But let's double check and make sure I'm not wrong on that. Let's see, RAID 10, so right here. RAID 1 plus 0, right? So it's going to do this thing where it's got disk striping to protect the data, and it's got some redundancy, so then it requires a minimum of 4 disks. I was right about that. You want to have kind of 0, you want to have kind of an even number of disks for that one. So then we get into 5 and 6 and RAID 5. So RAID 5 is really the type of RAID that we want probably to use most of the time, in my opinion. This is what I look for. So this is the one where you get striped data. It has a minimum of 3 disks and no maximum. But you stripe data across all of these individual disks, but it has that redundancy set in where if you lose a disk, you can swap it out. And the more drives you have, the more you could potentially lose at the same time and still recover your data. So RAID 5 is a pretty nice option there. And then I want to say RAID 6 is kind of like RAID 5 with mirroring, but I could be remembering wrong. Yeah, dual drive failure protection, so it's similar to RAID 5. And because it uses data striping and parity data to provide redundancy, however, RAID 6 arrays include 2 independent sets of parity data instead of 1. So yeah, so RAID 6 is just a step above RAID 5. But again, you need at least 3 drives. So if you're not going to use 3 drives, the RAID 5 and 6 are not going to help you much. Just be aware of that. RAID 0 is great. It stripes data, but you can definitely lose the data if a drive goes bad on you. So be aware of that as well. You don't want that to be your only copy of things for sure. RAID 1 is where you're really kind of mirroring 2 drives, so that you have 2 copies. And then RAID 1 plus 0 is kind of a combination of those. RAID 5 has redundancy built in with a minimum of 3 drives, and RAID 6 has multiple redundancy built in to help you recover that data, but again requires at least 3 drives, and probably more than that most of the time is what you would want. So there's your RAID types, and really that's kind of what you're picking here. In this case, let's just do a single drive for now. We'll set up RAID later. So here you can enable compression, which helps if you have storage constraints and you're worried about not being able to store everything that you want. You can enable compression on storage, but understand that compressing it and decompressing it takes resources and can take time. So if you're trying to do media streaming, you may not want to compress it and decompress it and try to stream the media at the same time, unless you have a really, really good machine or a fast machine that can take advantage of some hardware acceleration on top of the software and stuff like that. But you can do compression. We'll just leave it for now, no compression. And then you have mount options, so if you want to mount the drives in various places, you can do that. And they give you a little bit of hint text over here, a helper text on the right. And I should have zoomed this up earlier. I apologize for not doing that earlier, but this is really a field for advanced users, and it uses ButterFS capabilities, but it's a comma-separated string of options that you can put in here. I really don't know what those are. I'm not familiar with all of this stuff, so it's not something that I would use right out of the gate until I could learn more about it. But if you know ButterFS and you're familiar with it and you know how to use this, then just be aware you do have that capability. And then finally down here we have the actual drives that we want to use. Now I have to zoom back out because it does kind of cover up my checkboxes there a little bit. But we'll just go down and we'll look, and you know, I'm not going to pair up this 7 terabyte drive with anything else, so I'm just going to check that box to say that's the one that I want to use. And then down here you'll see that it kind of builds out the options that you've selected as you go, and it tells you what it's going to be. It's going to be a 1 by 7.3 terabyte total raw capacity, and then total usable capacity. So if we uncheck that one and we go back up and we say let's do a RAID 6, and then we pick the 2 terabyte and the 3 terabyte, you can kind of see what's going to happen here. So I'm using 2 different drives, and it says here you've got 6.4 terabytes of total raw capacity, and then total usable capacity, and it says not enough disks because I haven't picked 3. So it's giving me hints that I need more disks in this array. So I'll pick this final one, and then it'll tell me, okay, now you've got enough. And we're just going to go and basically say, okay, here we've got these 3 drives, and here's what you get for total raw capacity. And then you'll see total usable capacity. This is the thing to understand about RAID. This is one thing that I think ZFS really has over standard RAID. Standard RAID wants you to use the same size disks in order to get that capacity out of those disks. When you use multiple mixed disks in regular RAID, it's going to take the smallest drive, and that is going to be your usable capacity. So it doesn't matter if I put a 12 terabyte drive and a 12 terabyte drive and a 1 terabyte drive, I am not going to get 25 terabytes. I'm going to get 1 terabyte of usable space because that is the smallest drive. So you need to understand that when you start setting up your arrays. This is a really important thing that people don't realize. When you look at TrueNAS with ZFS arrays will take it, certain ones anyway, certain ZFS types will take advantage of all of the space on the drives even though it's striping data across them. So ZFS figures out how to use all of the capacity of those drives, whereas RAID does not do that. It definitely will take the smallest drive, and that's going to be your usable capacity. So I just wanted to kind of show you that real quick before we went on. But we'll go back to single here, and we'll use this 8 terabyte drive, and then we're going to do submit. So I've created a pool. So I went and set up my disks. Now I've created a pool. Here's my pool. Okay. And if I go back to the disks section, you'll see now I have 2 pools. So this is my main pool, and then this is my backups pool. So like I said, you just work your way down the list, and now we have shares. These are the system default shares. So I'm just going to click on create a share. I'm going to give it a name, and this is going to be Brian Backup. And then I don't want to use the Rockstor drive. I want to use this backups drive that I just realized I capitalized the A on, but that's okay. And then on the compression, it says inherit. Yes, so you set that up on the pool. You can enable compression separate from that on the share, but I'm just going to say inherit, which was no compression. And then down here, I'm going to define how much space I want to use. And I'm going to set this to 2 terabytes actually. And then down here I'm just going to say submit. Oh, it can't have spaces. I forgot about that. Underscore backup. Here we go. Alright, so I've got a share that's been created called Brian's Backup. Now, last step is go down to what you want to create as your file sharing. So I'm going to go to Samba, and I'm going to do create an export is what they call it. And I'm going to use Brian's Backup for this. And then the authorized users. So I'm here in this list. I'm going to put myself as an authorized user. Is it browsable? Yes, I want it to be browsable on my network. So if you don't want that and you just want to use like command line tools to get to it, you can put no, but I'm going to put yes so it's discoverable. Can guests access it? In this case, I'm going to say no because these are my backups. Is it read-only? Yes or no? I'm going to say no because I want to be able to write to the drive. And then here's a comment that you can add. It just says Samba export. That's fine. And then if you're going to enable shadow copy, like you're going to be imaging this thing with some other kind of system tools, you might want to do this. But here they give you a little information about what that really means. You can click there to see what that is. And then down here you can set up some custom configurations. Again, this is kind of an advanced option. It's not something that I use. And then you're going to do submit. And we've created our first system share with Samba. Now, I want to say that I was not able to see the Samba shares last time just using my browser, but let's go see if I'm mistaken. I might be. So this is a Linux machine. Let's go to network. We'll go to other locations, and then here you see Rockstor already shows up. So I'm going to click on Rockstor. Oh, there it is right there. So I can see it, so that's awesome. If I double click it, it should prompt me to log in, which it's doing. So you want to click on registered user, and then Brian, it's called work group because that's what I did set up for Samba just to make things easy. I'm going to put in my password for this machine, and then I'm going to put remember forever. Now I don't know that this always works, but that's something with this system. It's not really the Rockstor stuff, I think. So I'm going to hit OK, and you see it mounts it here, which is great. So I've got this backup that's set up on Rockstor, and I can actually go and save some data to it. So if I go back over to my videos here, I can just pick one of these guys. If I sort by size, Yeah, I've got this 3.9 gig video, and I'm not going to make you watch me move that whole thing. Here, we'll do this one that's 190 megabytes, I guess. Yeah, so we'll copy that. We'll go back to this drive, and you can even create a folder in here if you want to. So I can go here and create a folder, and I can say, let's call this video, and that is now on the Rockstor server. And I can paste this into that folder, and you'll see up here, here's kind of the how long it takes, and it's doing pretty well. I'm on a Wi-Fi connection on this machine. That machine out there is wired, so it's going pretty quick. I mean, it's not the fastest for sure because of the wireless side on this one, but it's doing pretty well. Once this is done, I mean, really, I've got that thing on my backup server. So if I go over here to the dashboard, now remember I said it prompts you here every time. You can kind of see that, but here you can kind of watch what the drive's doing. You can see network information that's going on the Rockstor side, so you can kind of see that it's starting to take up some space. And as you add things, you can see the shares by usage, so it'll show you like how much usage you have on those shares. And right now mine is sitting at 0.00% because it's 2 terabytes, and I've just copied over like 190 megabytes. It's just not going to show much. This is the OS for Rockstor. But then as things go up, you can see the pool capacity and usage. So I think this is it grows as you put in more information. That's really the basics of Rockstor. We haven't gotten way into it, but we've gotten a little way into it there. So on the next video, we'll do a little bit more on setting up some shares, and we'll set up some machines with actual backups, just like we did on TrueNAS, and I'll set up some extra users and kind of run you guys through those processes so that you can get your system set up as well. But this is Rockstor. On the third video, we'll go through the plugin system, which is called Rock-Ons, and that uses Docker. So you can get pretty much anything that runs in Docker to run on Rockstor. Now they have built-in stuff from their store, but you can also customize the ones that you want to add and upload, which is pretty great. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.